Well, shalom everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for joining me on this video today. We're going to continue to look at Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new translation and commentary of Duties of the Mind based off it's a commentary on the work Chivot HaLevavot, which is translated as Duties of the Heart, written 1,000 or so years ago, sometime in the 1100s by Rabbi Bakr ibn Pekuda, and it is a work that deals exclusively with the concept of Musar, and that is the refinement of a person's ethical behavior. And this introductory volume is quite thin, as I've pointed out in quite a few other videos. There is the cover of it there, and you can pick this up across the web at most Judaica outlets. For those of you in Australia, I would encourage you to support your local Jewish businesses. And in my particular area, standout business is Gold's World of Judaica in Bondi in Sydney. And there is also a larger Gold's World of Judaica located in Melbourne. And so I encourage you to get in contact with those businesses and begin to purchase your copies of Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new translation commentary of Duties of the Mind. These works will help you and they'll get into some personal areas in your life for you to have a look at and iron out. Guaranteed. And I encourage you to go out and buy anything and everything that has been put out there by Rabbi Avigdor Miller. Okay, so where are we up to? Chapter 16. We're up to chapter 16. And this next topic is entitled Mitzvot of Low Public Awareness. Mitzvot of Low Public Awareness. And again, we just going back, we're at page 117. We're on page 117. Okay, let's get into it. Note, the author is still trying to find reasons why the study of mitzvot of the mind is widely neglected. He now considers the possibility that the subject is too well known to warrant detailed study. So again, we are now looking at another aspect of really coming to terms with the viability of producing a work of this nature. And it ultimately comes down to when you strip everything away, and as this particular section is going to get to, it's all coming down to a lack of desire to invest in something that ultimately nobody can see or have an awareness of that's outside yourself. And so that removes a lot of the desire for the majority of people to spend time working on, because at least in the initial stages, nobody is going to see the results of that labor, just you and Hashem. And so anybody that's anywhere rooted in the realms of ego and pride is straight away, that's going to be a stumbling block for them to take on. And so if you're finding you're somebody that loves this stuff and is really getting into this stuff and really enjoying it, then that's a good indication that you have a really good handle on ego and pride and all these areas of sort of wanting to be sort of Jack the Lad. You've got a really good handle on where you stand in regards to that, and trying to stay as far away from all that as you possibly can, because certainly in the early stages, if not in the sort of the mid to early stages, or mid to mid long term stages, because eventually it will affect how you speak, it will affect how you act, of course. But in those initial stages, even after a while, no one's going to see anything. It's just going to be you and Hashem. This is a world that only you and Hashem have privy to at first. And ultimately, no one has privy to what's going on in your mind. It's just you. You say, well, there's some mind readers out there. Okay, if there are, and I'm sure maybe there are somewhere, the likelihood that you're going to run into them is pretty slim. Okay, and I also said, perhaps the mitzvot of the mind are so clear and well known, and all peoples are automatically connected with them, so that it's natural that people should think of these thoughts. I thought that possibly as a result, the earlier scholars felt it wasn't necessary to write a sefer for everybody. But I looked into the behavior of mankind and I saw that it's not true. They have no idea of the obligations. They don't even know that they are responsible for them. I looked at the way people behave, not only now, but in many generations that are mentioned in Sepharim, and I found that to be far from these kinds of mitzvot, except for those especially fervent and energetic people who are different from others. The select individuals observe these mitzvot properly, as it is told about them, but as for the rest of the people, oh, how much was it necessary to rouse them and teach them? So who are these other people that are being spoken about here? They are none other than the Perushim, which you would know as Pharisees, which the majority of people watching this video would probably have a different type of perception of how, at least growing up you did, of who they actually are and how they actually operated as people. But as we matured and we began to look into the certain sayings of a certain individual a lot clearly, these people are used as a benchmark of holiness. And in fact, it's gone on to say that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not have a place in the world to come. You'll not have a place in the kingdom. And you don't seldom hear that verse being quoted in Christian environments, because you have this supposed demographic of people who erred being used as a benchmark for holiness, of attaining holiness. And it goes against the sort of the current, the trend that's dominated the Christian world for the majority of years. And this is certainly true for most people in our time, referring to the generation of the author, early 11th century, Spain. We have been careless even in the knowledge of the practical mitzvot that we do with our limbs, and certainly they are negligent when it comes to the mitzvot of the mind. A great lack of awareness. Unfortunately, the majority of people are totally unaware of the mitzvot of the mind. For example, consider a mitzvot of loving Hashem. I love you, Hashem, because you have given me food today. You gave me food yesterday too, and the day before. You have never stopped feeding me all these years. This is, as we say in Brokot HaMazon, the grace after meals, we have never lacked. Imagine that you are walking in the street thinking, I love you, Hashem, you fed me. How many people are thinking that? Perhaps 1 out of a million. You're walking away from a restaurant, you've had a delicious meal, it's a beautiful morning, the sun is out, the sun is shining, it's a blue sky, it's a beautiful warm day, perhaps with a nice light breeze, and you are feeling sated, and you are very thankful that Hashem has fed you such a beautiful meal, and you're walking along actually thinking about that. It's quite rare. You'll find people often looking at their environment and what they're actually seeing in real time when they're looking out. Maybe you're seeing people walking their dogs, walking past you. You're fixating on them. You're looking at them and going, I wonder what that person's life's like. I wonder who that is. Or that person's wearing a t-shirt that I had once. And so your environment is constantly informing you of what to think, rather than you choosing what to think and choosing the right things to think about. It's an obligation to remember the blessings that we receive from Hashem, and we say 3 times in the Ashrei, the remembrance of our great goodness they will utter in composing this Mizmor. David HaMelech uses the word Avigdor, they will utter, because these words also mean overflow. It suggests that an expression of Hashem's great goodness, the cup will overflow with gratitude. So the Ashrei is a part of the morning prayers, and it is in this particular quote is from Tehillim 145:7. The remembrance of your great goodness they will utter, and of your righteousness they will sing exuberantly. And so it's a goodness that Hashem is giving you in abundance, to the point where that abundance is overflowing. And you can see just by looking at your life and looking at all the things that Hashem has actually given you, you can see that He has not only given you what you need, but He's given you more than what you need, to the point where your cup is at times overflowed with blessings and with abundance. It also suggests that in expressing Hashem's great goodness, the cup will overflow with gratitude. The message to us is that our minds should be so full of gratitude to Hashem that we are overflowing with thanks. But when people are unaware of this, they certainly don't do it. The author is saying that he found that most people, even of the previous generations, were very far from this kind of mitzvah. The only one who were really careful about this mitzvah were the Perushim, which is who we just mentioned, the Pharisees, the most fervent and energetic people who were different from the rest. Outside of this group, the mitzvah has been largely neglected. And so one of the criticisms that Yeshua levels at the Perushim in his day is that their negligence, now these are the ones that were corrupted, not the Perushim, the ones who had managed to withstand all the things that were pressing against the nation of Israel at the time, being the Roman occupation, the influence of Herod, all these sorts of things. Even in his criticism of them, he says, you tithe from your herb garden, which you well do. And so even in his criticism, he's actually mentioning something that they should surely be commended for, and that was being fastidious enough to actually tithing from their own personal gardens that they had in their homes. And so the issue was that some of the weightier matters of the Torah were being neglected. And then, you could quite easily say, well, what about those that were not Perushim in the day? Their area of problem was they did do the weightier matters, but neglected the less weightier matters. And so you had one demographic, which, has been so publicized over the centuries, that have neglected the weightier matters. And so they should have been, in a sense, because they were part of the builders of the Torah, the ones that were carrying on the dissemination and the teaching of the Torah to the populace from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. But you also had the sort of common man on the street that would put so much emphasis into the weightier matters, they would lose sight of the less weightier matters, and they would be having issue as well. They would be having issue as well because, okay, they focused on the weightier matters, but they neglected the lighter matters, the less weightier matters, which is an issue as well. But because they weren't in a position of authority, of teaching such an important thing, there's little to no, nothing recorded about that. But we still see it today within religious demographics that profess to be followers of the Bible. We can see, okay, they're not murdering, they're not, they're not slandering, maybe they're not stealing, but there are a considerable majority of things that aren't sort of deal breakers, as it were, aren't sort of crucial to impeding with living a peaceful life, but nonetheless they're being neglected. And these are all part of the framework and the beautiful tapestry of Hashem's Torah. Outside of this group, the mitzvot has been largely neglected, and even when an individual among them is drawn to look into the wisdom of the Torah, such a person tries to study these things that would make him look like a lamdan, that is a scholar, and among the ordinary people, so that they will respect him for his learning, but he does not bother doing things that nobody sees. This is it. This is what I was mentioning before. A person doesn't bother doing anything that nobody sees. If you know nobody's going to see a certain type of conduct, and you're not very good at that type of conduct, are you going to bother working on that to make that pristine? And if the answer is no, then the question that would give rise to is why? And the answer to that would be because you are still rooted in ego. You're still rooted in pride. You still want to impress. You have this desire to want to impress people and show people that you are doing well. Even at the cost of exaggerating what might be true. Even maybe to the point of lying and misleading somebody. Because a person wants to feel like they're an important part of a group or of whatever gathering you're attending or interacting with. A person wants to feel not only accepted but be respected within a group, and people don't realize that people are going to love and respect you even if you're not as impressive as somebody else, or don't appear as to be impressive as somebody else is. And people are most impressed by honesty and humility, and it trumps any type of other thing that people can be impressed by, particularly if it's materialism. Humility and honesty is more impressive than somebody who has great wealth. Somebody will say, well, that's great that you've got that wealth. But at the end of the day, if you're somebody who's, really going nowhere fast in terms of your behavior, ultimately that wealth is going to do nothing for you. It's you're in an environment of preparation, and you're kicking back in that environment of preparation, and you're enjoying that environment and not utilizing that environment for what you've been put in there for. And so it's sort of like, well, what are you doing trying to enjoy now when there's work to do now? And really the ultimate enjoyment comes from doing work in the now, rather than trying to find a place of comfort and pleasure, and people just say, well, I just want to be on receive all the time. This is not going to give you the peace of mind that you think you can get out of it. Rather, it's by having a purpose and fulfilling that purpose. Even if you don't achieve as far as you thought you could, but you've at least achieved something, and you're at least active and moving forward, even if it's a slow pace. There's way more joy that comes from knowing that you're going in the right direction, even if it's at a snail's pace, rather than somebody who's not even going down the path that they're put in the world to go down. They're just completely ignoring it, and they're just using every moment of their life to drain pleasure and joy from it, rather than do what their purpose is in actually being here in the first place. I may just reread a few sentences here. But he does not bother doing things that nobody sees, like the thoughts of the mind, because nobody will honor him for them, and he may be drawn to learning halakot. He needs to make rulings on halakhic questions for people, but he is unlikely to be studying chivot halavavot, as he won't get any credit for that knowledge. It is unfortunately a great rarity to find anybody who is interested. And so a person will invest their time in the laws of halakha, because people are constantly wanting to find what the answers are to halakha, so they know what to do depending on the situation that they're faced with. But in terms of operating in where a person's mind should be and how they should be operating internally, people rarely have questions on that subject, because people are more concerned as to how they look as opposed to how they really are. Huge statement. I'll say it again. People are more concerned how they look as opposed to how they really are. And so a person who's more concerned over how he really looks, he will invest everything he has into learning halakot, because that will have have a benefit because he'll be a source of knowledge and be constantly sought after to provide rulings and enlightenment to other people who are struggling to know what to do in certain situations. Whereas kavod halavavot, the duties of the heart, the duties of the mind, this is and we can see it in many religious institutions, even Judaism, that there's a huge vacuum to this realm of Torah, and it's to its own detriment because you see so many false branches of Judaism now with Orthodox, modern Orthodox, and with Reform Judaism, which are doing so much damage and are really what's leading all these catastrophes, sort of down, leading the Jewish world to experience all these catastrophes, forms of unkosher Judaism and Jews who are becoming very wayward and becoming very worldly. Nobody would think to reprimand and send an email reprimanding Sacha Baron Cohen, who is not only a Jew but he is a Cohen, for all the things that he's actually produced in terms of film and television, and all the tumah that is connected to all that, and how much damage he as an individual is doing to the Jewish world, just him alone. All these things that occur are repercussions for the nation of Israel to in its turning away from Judaism and its attachment to Hashem and wanting to become like the world. All these cataclysms that eventually come upon the Jews are actually rooted. The root of the reason why they occur is because the nation is going to be swallowed up by the tumor of the world and disappear into the sea of humanity and become like the rest of humanity. And they are attached to Hashem in a way that they are not allowed to do that. There's no other path. Now, they may spend 10, 20, 30 years doing that, becoming quite successful in that, but ultimately Hashem is going to rein them in at some point. We're looking at people like Jerry Seinfeld. The Seinfeld series was quite popular, and it was, some of the humor was okay. It wasn't too, but ultimately, this guy and anybody involved with the production, these people are Jews. They are a set apart people, and they have neglected the Torah, and they've got getting involved in entertainment, and they're merging themselves with the world, and the world at some point, the people who aren't Jews, they eventually regurgitate that. They will reject that, and whether it's going to be another 50 years, another 100 years, or 200 years, eventually they're going to turn on them, and we're seeing that beginning to happen today. And so, people say, well, don't be so fixated on the fact that, there was a Nova, like a rave festival in the land of Israel attended by mostly Jews. That's not the problem. It is the problem. And unless you're as upset by the fact that there was a secular music festival with drug taking and alcohol and all sorts of debauchery and modesty taking place at that event, unless you're as disgusted by that as you are disgusted by what followed with the Hamas coming in and a lot of Palestinian civilians coming in and causing so much havoc, unless you're disgusted by the fact that on a high holy day, on a culminating series of high holy days, the beginning day, literally the day when the judgment begins to be meted out for that year, that this is happening in the Holy Land, then technically you're part of the problem, because you still haven't got your head around the reality of what's happening, the whole macro sort of understanding, the overarching understanding of what's going on. Somebody contacted me recently and said, Charlie Kirk passed away. I had no idea who this was. Some lady sent me a text message yesterday, the day before, whenever he passed away, and she said this guy's passed away. I had no idea who this guy was. I do now, and he sounded like he was a pretty nice guy, but I have issues with what he was doing, in that he was going into forbidden places and he was engaging in debates. He was putting himself in a life risk, And it's forbidden to go into universities. Just by the very nature of the makeup of what universities are, people don't realize, certainly for a Jew, these are forbidden places. This is like going into a night of, going into a den of iniquity. This is like going to a brothel. But people are, a university is like going to a brothel. It's worse. It's actually worse. And so I saw some footage of this guy. And so, I'm surprised this guy's, it's been left to this long for something like this to happen. And, you have this Ben Shapiro guy, he's saying, well, I'll continue to talk in universities, otherwise the enemy will win. You shouldn't have been talking at them in the first place. But when you look into the ideology of Ben Shapiro, and, he says a lot of great things, he's modern Orthodox. And so, he's wearing that kippah and he's being involved in things that he shouldn't have any connection with whatsoever. His reacting to, immoral content and videos, and he's rolling his eyes and all these sorts of things. This is time that he's spending that isn't engaged in learning that he'll never get back. And so, the mere fact that I didn't even know who this Charlie Kirk guy was, okay, seemed like a nice guy, he had a lot of similar ideas as myself. To me, it was a little marker that I'm for all the other things I might be doing wrong in my life, I'm getting something right because I had no idea who this guy was. And you're saying, how, Jason? You're saying you're doing something right because you didn't know who Charlie Kirk was? And the answer is yes. Yes, I am absolutely saying that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I've got my head in the Torah half the time, or hopefully more than half the time. And I don't have time to watch these videos of people picking fights and trying to debate the enemy. There's no point debating these people. They are, it's like debating Amalek. Why are you debating Amalek? They're just going to shoot you because they can't reason with you. All the little videos I've seen recently of this guy, you can't reason with the guy's logic. And so they don't have an answer. So their only answer is a bullet in the head. And there's thousands and thousands of people that probably wanted to shoot him in the head. And finally, one of them did in the physical what they've been thinking in their minds. And so, this guy was willfully putting his life at risk. You can record a video and put it out online and thousands of people will see it. Millions of people might see it. And there's no risk. There's no risk. It's pikuach nefesh. So you've got to really think about this and think about going into these places and you're basically, you're giving them an opportunity to kill you. And you shouldn't be doing that. You've got no business even going onto a university campus to use a bathroom. You shouldn't be going, when you pass one in the street, you shouldn't be even looking at the place. The same with the church. You can't even be looking at a church. You can't be looking at its architecture. You shouldn't even be spending time looking at it. You should look away. Do you hear what I'm saying? I'm serious. Because we've been fraternizing with Christianity for far too long, and it's getting you nowhere. All right, let's get back into it. He studied those things which will give him reputation among those who believe to be learned men of the generation. But he strays from the way of the Torah to study things which will not give him any special personal achievement. When a person learns Torah, shila lishma, without worthy motivation, for the purpose of becoming admired, it's not going to help him much. So think about it. Are you learning Torah because you want to be a person of notoriety and you want to be somebody within your particular demographic? Or are you learning Torah because you need to learn Torah to fix and repair and recover yourself from all this tumah, all this filthiness, all this uncleanness? Think about it. Ask yourself, stand in a mirror and ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to be a person of notoriety, or am I doing this because I want to be fixed? I want Hashem's salvation. I want to see the great physician. I want to be healed. And you might find that, okay, maybe the majority of why you're doing it is for the right reasons, but there may be some percentage where you're still getting a kick out of it. And this needs to be dealt with. And you think this Charlie Kirk guy, if I'm getting his name right, I hope I'm getting his name right. Forgive me if I'm not getting his name right. Did this guy ever get any personal enjoyment out of winning these debates or engaging in these arguments and causing people to sound like fools? If the answer is yes, then that's a problem. You shouldn't be going out of your way to pick fights because you enjoy it. You're doing this because it may have to be done, but you're not doing it because you find that it's fun. Because then you'll go and do it when it's not time to do it. Do you hear what I'm saying? And so the whole idea that you have to engage on these things at times, you shouldn't be wanting to go out of your way to engage in a verbal or a physical fight. But you have to do it out of necessity, then do it and wipe the floor with them. If it's out of necessity, they've backed you into a corner. But you don't go out of your way to put yourself in a life risk. I hope you're hearing what I'm saying. Such study will not keep him from making great errors in his soul. We know there were people like Korah who certainly are Talmud Chacham. Remember Korah, you and I, no one watching this video will ever attain the level of Korah in terms of his holiness, in terms of his Torah knowledge. He was a man that was so holy that he was given a vision by Hashem that his ancestry will have a place amongst the prophets. And this is one of the reasons that propelled him to go against Moshe Rabbeinu. And ultimately it was true because his son survived and they went on and their descendants became great. But Korah was a righteous man and he knew more Torah than any of us would ever be aware of. And yet he fell. Yet he made a fateful error, as we're about to read. But nevertheless, he made a fateful error. Doeg Hadamai and Achitophel, also two men that fell that were great, were also very great Talmudei Chachamim, and they lost everything. They lost everything. The reason is that they did not have the intention of serving Hashem with a full heart. There was some portion in them floating around that was not there for the right reasons. And you need to go on a mission and hunt and rout out whatever it is inside you that isn't there for the right reasons and burn it out. You need to burn it out because if you don't burn it out, Hashem is going to have to reprimand you and burn it out for you, and that will be 20 million times painful than you just doing it yourself. They became Torah scholars in order to gain favor in the eyes of the public. The reason that they did not have the intention of serving Hashem with a full heart, they became Torah scholars in order to gain favor in the eyes of the public, but in their hearts they were not truly committed to be loyal to Hashem. Thus they stumbled by yielding to their inclination towards jealousy and glory seeking, and so they fell into very great errors. They became enemies of David HaMelech and they tried to destroy him. In the end they lost their kelik, their portion in the Olam Haba, the world to come. By studying Torah subject matter for the sake of personal advantage, he is misplacing his efforts. Had he not known these things, he would not be punished for that lack of knowledge. Even though Torah learning is very precious, people who are missing some of its vital knowledge will not be punished if they didn't have the opportunity to learn it. When a person doesn't know something, he's not punished for that lack of knowledge as such. However, he may be punished for bitul ziman, wasting time, if he had the opportunity to learn Torah but failed to do so. And this is the conundrum. If you didn't know, you won't be punished, but nearly everyone will be punished because ultimately nearly everyone is guilty of wasting time. So on the one hand, people will say, and you hear it thousands of times, people say, you won't be punished for what you don't know. And the answer to that is absolutely true. That's absolutely true. However, nearly no one, and I won't even say nearly everyone, is not guilty of wasting time. No, nearly everyone is guilty of wasting time. So while, everybody genuinely might not know something, everyone is guilty at some point of wasting time. And therefore, we're always guilty if we don't know something, because that wasting time will be brought forward and say, well, okay, you chose not to potentially learn that. Now, if there was no record of wasted time, the person gets off, and I won't say scot-free because it's not. The person hasn't done anything scot-free. He's worked a hard Torah-centric life, and he's going to receive the rewards of his labor. But, you don't find that. You won't find that. You can honestly stand up and say, I've never wasted my time ever, especially now with all the distractions we have with social media, mobile phone technology, things invading us as they are. No one, not a soul, can say they've never wasted time. So nobody can rest on the laurel that they won't be punished for something they didn't know. Because once the Beit Din in Shemaim actually finds out that there's something the person needed to do they didn't do, and they're asked why they didn't do it, and the person says, I didn't know, then they have to look as to what the person's actual routines and schedules were. And then they go, okay, well, there's so many hundreds of hours here that you chose to do something which wasn't learning, which you could have done, but you chose not to. And during those times of learning, those however many thousands of hours you could have quite potentially come across that thing that we found that you shouldn't do, you willfully chose not to learn. You willfully chose to unwind, as they say. Well, I need to unwind. Like the Torah can't be something that you can go through and learn to unwind. You can. There's plenty of things in the Torah you can be reading to unwind. But don't get me wrong, I know what that means. Ultimately, it means go for a walk. It means to think about what you've just learned. You can't be learning something new and thinking about something you've just learned and meditating on that while you're learning something new. You need to have points where you stop and reflect. I get that. But that, people take that too far and they're doing a whole series on Netflix, You know what I mean? So you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful with that I didn't know. Yes, you're not going to be punished for what you didn't know, but you will be punished for wasting time. And so ultimately you will be punished for what you didn't know because you wasted time when you could have known. Think about it. But when a person who neglects to explore the fundamentals of the faith and the foundation of the Torah is definitely responsible for having failed to learn that which he should have neglected and forsaken. Torah is definitely responsible for having failed to learn that which he should have neglected and forsaken. Rav Yisrael Salanta disagrees partially with the author of Kivot HaLevavot. He believes that even the people who learn Torah Shila Lishma, not for its own sake, shall be encouraged as much as possible, even though they are learning for ulterior motives. Their learning is not wasted. A person who engaged in Pilpul complex learning, Pilpul is complex analyses of halakhic issues, for his own glory should not be blamed and should not be called a sinner. Hashem is pleased with the people who seek out about the Torah, even when their intention is selfish. It is an honor for Hashem when the Torah is seriously studied, and Hashem rewards even if the study was not for a totally sincere purpose. Now, that's true, but then you're running the risk of becoming the next Achitophel or the next Korah. Do you want to be actually floating around in that lottery of balls? You've seen the lottery on TV and the balls are in this, moving around this larger ball, and then one of the balls comes out and there's a number. By you studying it for, your own grandiose, desires and wanting to be sort of Jack the Lad in the Torah community, you are now in another whole section where you can be plucked out at will and you can become the next Korah, who is still in Gehenna to this very day. Okay, so, this Rav Yisrael Salanta is correct in what he's saying. But despite the fact that he's correct, you are running now the potential of having your own Torah learning be the very thing that brings you undone. Do you see what I'm saying? So why risk that? Why risk that? Who is worse off? A person who completely rejected the Torah, or a person that used the Torah to allow them to become a reprobate. Think about it. But the author of Kavod HaLevot is saying that fundamentally these people are missing what's most important. There you go. He puts the primary emphasis on the things of the mind and argues that such studies will not be of much help for becoming perfect in the way Hashem wants us unless we devote more time studying the foundations of our faith, like the concepts of bitachon, like trust, avodat Hashem, that is serving Hashem, and yirat Hashem, that is the fear of Hashem. Our service of Hashem is going to be lacking in some way, and we're going to lack fear of Hashem. And if we lack fear of Hashem, those of you that are familiar with all the main teachings on having fear of Hashem, is if the fear of Hashem isn't predominantly pervading, the pervasive thing over everything that you are and you're learning, ultimately your learning will profit you nothing. But if your fear of Hashem is more precious to you than your learning, then your learning will endure. A person would not be able to fulfill the mitzvot of the mind if he didn't know all the details so that he could do them, like believing in the unity of Hashem. The unity of Hashem. Note, the unity of Hashem is a primary principle of Kavod HaLevavot. The author believes that we have an obligation to study the clear indication that Hashem put in the world to make us aware of his presence. The world is full of testimonies to Hashem, and the more we look at these testimonies, the more clearly we see his presence everywhere. It is not enough to believe in Hashem merely by tradition. If a person is able to see Hashem with his eyes, he gets much more reward than if his knowledge of Hashem is limited to what he has been told. It's a different kind of emunah. So this is somebody who grew up in a frum family and is from birth, and they know what no other lifestyle than their frum lifestyle. And they choose to do nothing in addition to the traditions and the observances that they adhere to. They choose to do nothing additionally to draw a closer connection with Hashem, except by way of how they were brought up in their home. So they'll never not keep Shabbat. They'll never not do the prayers that they're obligated to pray. But will they do anything extra? No, not rarely, if ever. And so this becomes a problem. Because yes, they believe. No, they're not like the sinners of the world. But they're not bringing anything in addition to themselves. They're towing the line, so to speak. Does that mean they're going to, it's all going to be for nothing? No, it's not. But it could be so much more beautiful and so much more rewarding. But it still could lead to them to, eventually turn away because there's nothing tethering them except the fact that it's just something they've always known. This is why you get a lot of people who grow up in communities like the Amish, and they have TV shows where, a certain daughter or son wants to leave his Amish community and go into a secular one because he's just curious. He's curious. These people live to a ripe old age and they seem happy. They seem like they're having a good time. Well, we're in this community sort of flung out in the middle of nowhere, and we can't even drive a car. We're looking, we're sort of living like people in ancient times. Why are we doing this to ourselves? What are we afraid of? These people live to a ripe old age. Our people in our community live to a ripe old age. What's the difference? Unless they're prepared to go above and beyond and search out the truth for themselves, despite the fact growing up in set apart communities. We're obligated to study the belief in Hashem's unity and be convinced of our emunah through reason and logic. Or is it enough if we know it through tradition? Most people tend to rely on tradition alone, and that reliance is called emunah peshuta, that is simple faith. But the author claims there is a great mitzvah for people who study and ultimately convince themselves by sound logic that Hashem is here and that he is one. He is echad. Is it enough if we say that our Elohim is one? As the ignorant people say it without a sign or miracle, when people say echad, they really don't know what that means. The author therefore argues that we must study that phrase and be able to explain it in a deeply fundamental way, because without special thought, we have no proofs to back up what we say. So when you say Hashem is one, somebody says, what does that mean? You should be able to back that question up with a lot of interesting insights as to Hashem's echadness, his oneness, if that's such a word. If we just think about it a bit, we can easily see that Hashem is one. For example, to provide food for the world, we need sunlight, which comes to us from the distant sun, 93 million miles away. The winds are also necessary because the wind brings carbon dioxide to the plants, with which they make starch. The oceans are necessary because without the oceans, we wouldn't have any water. That is because the rain which falls on the earth comes from the oceans. How does it get there? The sun evaporates the water from the oceans. It dries it in the form of water vapor, and the vapor rises up toward the sky. The winds take these clouds of water vapor and blow them over the continents, where the water condenses and falls in the form of rain. The force of gravity acts to pull the rain down to the ground, where the soil cooperates with the rain, the sun, and the winds to produce food. We see that all the forces of nature are united in the production of food. This demonstrates how Hashem's world is one. All the forces of nature work together to produce the result of being able to support mankind, to give food to give people the food they need. And so, if, you're talking to somebody that in any way has a inclination or a leniency towards scientific method, and is all about science, and that's the reason why they're not religious, because they're science based. And you start sharing this with them, they're going to be like, okay, you're going to have not all the time, but there's a good chance you're going to have an attentive individual or audience. When we see that we say Hashem is Echad, that's one way of seeing the Achdut of Hashem. There's one way of seeing the Achdut of Hashem. It's the way that the author refers. It's the way that the author prefers, rather than merely saying Hashem Echad and accepting it by tradition. The person looks at the world of nature and sees how everything cooperates for the purpose of supplying food. That's the proof that Hashem is Echad. And that's just one of 1,000 routes you could go down to prove Hashem's oneness. We can also see this in history. We see how all the forces of history combine to help the Jewish nation survive. And that's true, because all the nations that have come against the Jews have actually helped the Jews maintain their identity, because it is on the back of the Jews risking assimilating into the rest of the world and disappearing from mankind that come these holocausts and these pogroms, causing the Jews to realize that, hey, we need to be doing our jobs, guys. Otherwise, rather than the people thinking we're great, they're going to come and kill us. Because normally in the natural, you would almost have the religious aspect of the Jews be completely shunned after the first Holocaust. They go, well, we don't want to be religious anymore. Look where it got us. But of course, you see Jews that do back away from religion after tragic events. But the majority across the board, after each Holocaust through the centuries, whether it be under the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the whoever, the nation comes out of it more spiritually intact, which, it's sort of supernatural, really. Because in the natural, you would say, well, if the reason why these things have happened because of religion, then I don't want any part of it. And you do see that happen at some sprinkled throughout, but the majority of the people, they don't react like that. They turn to religion. You see a lot of video footage of people during October 7. They're praying to Hashem and they're saying, Hashem, if I can get out of this, I will be religious. And a lot of them after October 7 became religious and attending kosher synagogues now. The nations that persecuted us over the centuries have ultimately withered away and been forgotten. Even the most powerful nations the world has ever seen, like Rome, Greece, Persia, and Babylon, are all gone forever. Nothing remains except some ruins. The only nation that has constantly overcome its persecutors and continues to survive is Israel, the nation of Israel. Thinking this over, we become convinced that Hashem is guarding his people. And so we see that Hashem is Echad in the world. So there's another example. There are various ways that people with intelligence can convince themselves that Hashem is Echad. That's what the author encourages. But for us to just say Echad without adding any kind of analytical thinking, he disapproves. Of course, for ignorant people, we have no alternatives. As for intelligent people who claim they are obligated to prove themselves that Hashem is Echad. Notice these aren't biblical proofs. These are just world looking at the world. These are looking at history. These are looking at science. So these proofs aren't going back to the Bible because you're just chasing your tail with most people. They're going outside the framework of the Bible and they're just looking at the natural world, scientific world, and looking at history. It's almost like convincing somebody of the Bible by not using the Bible, by just looking at simple logic. You look at homosexuality, and whenever I talk to somebody about homosexuality and why it's probably not a good thing for you to do, I never go to the Bible. I just look at common sense, because you do not have to go to the Bible to prove that it's not the way to go for a species to be engaged in acts of homosexuality in terms of continuation of the species on a very base level. But people aren't taught like that. They're taught to go back to the Bible, they don't want to. A lot of people don't want to hear that, because it's just the same old rhetoric. They want to see runs on the board. They want to see logic in terms of talk to me scientifically, talk to me historically. No problem at all. Let's go. Is it enough for us to just say that the words Elohim is one without understanding, or is it our duty to investigate the true meaning of Echad as opposed to the superficial meaning of Echad? Is it necessary to make special subject of Echad in our minds different from all other existing forms of Echad? If we say that Hashem is one king, we get the idea that he has power over people, but that doesn't begin to describe Hashem at all. It is still limiting Hashem and minimizing him. Hashem is one, but he is one in such a way that there is nothing that can be compared to him. Or not? Are we obligated to do all that or not? The believing, loyal Jew is forbidden to remain in ignorance of this matter. We must know what is meant by Echad, for the Torah has warned and admonished us about it, as it is written, quoting chapter 2 of the Chabad HaLevavot here, I think. Quoting from Deuteronomy 4:39. You shall know this day, and you shall take to heart your mind. So remember, whenever we see the Hebrew word lev, heart, it is also simultaneously referring to the mind, to the sekel. That Hashem, he is the Elohim, that is the system of Chabad HaLevavot. What does it mean that he should take it into his mind? It means that you should think about it and devote time to the subject. Therefore, when you study Shah HaBekina, the gate of reflection, we realize how the whole universe testifies to the fact that everything that exists has been created. Nothing is a result of chance, and therefore every object in the world refutes the atheist and the evolutionist. Every object in the world refutes the atheist and the evolutionist. It just does. Boom, every single object. They're in a battle where they're outnumbered 1 trillion to 1. Infinity to 1. Yet they seem to kind of, engage with people who haven't got a clue, and they look sort of like they're half decent, which is, pretty... you look at some of the things that famous actor and comedian Ricky Gervais says. I could tear that guy to shreds within a second, but you never seem to see him being engaged with anybody who has got a clue, or you might see it rarely, but you don't. Normally he's talking with people who haven't got a clue. He's talking with opponents that don't have people that oppose him who don't have a clue. And Hashem, I think Hashem does that. Hashem rewards these people and pays them to their face and gives them their reward now, and causes them to not, to somehow manage to go through life in the public eye and not ever be, have the floor wiped with them by somebody who knows half about what they're talking about. It's to bring them down to their own destruction. They never got an opportunity to debate with somebody that actually knew what they were talking about. And so they go to the grave never having questioned, what they've publicly been going on about all these years and ruining themselves for. All of those who claim that existence happened randomly are refuted by even one occurrence of the orange. And we've looked at the orange plenty of times in other videos, how the orange, if you ever want to argue with an evolutionist or an atheist, just say to them, I will just talk about an orange tree and you can talk about whatever else you like, and I guarantee you I will wipe the floor with you. But don't do that on a university campus surrounded by people that you don't know being onlookers to the debate, because you're just posturing yourself to look good in front of all these people. If you're going to engage with somebody, engage with them privately in a safe place. Online is pretty safe. Nobody can shoot you in the head if you are engaged in a text conversation. Okay. Why is it that the orange has seeds inside it? If I missed a bit there. Yes, I did. I missed a huge chunk. Hang on. Therefore, when we say the Shah Bakina, we're just going to reread a section because I can't find my place. We realize how the whole universe testifies to the fact that everything that exists has been created, nothing as a result of chance, and therefore every object in the world refutes the atheist and the evolutionist. All those who claim that existence happened randomly are refuted by even one occurrence of the orange. Here we are. Why is the orange so beautifully coloured on the outside and the underside of the skin is not coloured at all? Is that an accident? The answer is that people see the outside, but they don't see the underside of the skin. The orange is coloured beautifully to make it attractive to people so that they should see it among the green leaves and pick the fruit. Why is it that the orange has seeds inside it? How did these seeds get inside? With each seed being so amazingly complex. Each seed contains hundreds of thousands of pieces of wisdom. How is it possible to produce a tree when that seed is planted? Is the seed purely the result of an accident, of a mindless process? And therefore, when people look around and see the whole universe full of wisdom, they realize that His greatness and His kindness fill the world. And that is so true. It is possible to become full of conviction in Hashem's truth, and because of that, Hashem disputes all the enemies of truth. A person who never studied Kavod HaLevavot may say, I believe, but in his heart he is uncertain. He thinks, I will be loyal, but maybe, just maybe, they're right. He may not want to admit it, but he is not truly firm in his convictions. However, a Jew who studies these things properly, the way they are laid out in this book of Kavod HaLevavot, becomes a staunch believer of the great truth that Hashem is Echad and that the whole world testifies to it. He therefore fulfills the obligation that the Torah requires. That's why it's so important to study the Kavod HaLevavot. It's just so important. And so it is with other, whether you're a Orthodox Jew or a Nazarite. A Noahide. Whether you're an Orthodox Jew or a Noahide, the Kavod HaLevavot is for you. It just is. So it is with other mitzvot of the mind, which we have mentioned and which we will be mentioning. The believer's faith is not complete if he didn't know them and practice them, and that is the concealed chokhmah, the concealed wisdom. The author refers to the knowledge of Kavod HaLevavot as being concealed for two reasons. First of all, it is something that a person does not show to other people. It is done in the secrecy of his mind. He thinks about the important principles that the Torah wants him to put in his mind. Furthermore, these things that he couldn't tell other people because it would seem superfluous even to talk about them. Seems superfluous even to talk about them. I'll read that again. Furthermore, these are the things that he couldn't tell other people because it would seem superfluous even to talk about them. For instance, if a person tells his friend that there will be an olam haba, a world to come, the friend will say, Mi ki moshama lan, why are you telling me this? I already know there is an olam haba. But when he thinks about it, it as being something that is real. That is an entirely different thought. So people say, yeah, I believe there's a world to come. But in terms of the reality of it and how it's going to operate and what's going to fall by the way and what's going to be venerated, they don't have a clue. They don't know where to begin because they won't study the Kavod HaLevavot. It's just an abstract idea. Yes, they believe it, but it's all remains still in abstract form. It's not just something that is real, that is entirely different. That is an entirely different thought. It's just not a thought that can easily be conveyed to others. As it says in Mishlei 5:17, let these things be with you alone and not for strangers with you. That's a very interesting verse. Let these things be with you alone and not for strangers. That's from Proverbs 5:17. This is a thought which cannot be shared with strangers. Another reason why this knowledge is called zifunah, concealed, is because the purpose of acquiring it is not to display it to other people, such as to gain recognition or to be acclaimed as a chokhmah, as a wise person. A man who is engaged in thinking about these matters is not interested in gaining the acclaim of people. He just wants to find favor in the eyes of Hashem, and that's why it's called the secret wisdom. And it gives rise to the silent service, a service, an avodat that nobody sees. Just Hashem sees, and that's everything, To summarize, it is a secret because others cannot appreciate what the individual has in his mind, and because he doesn't show it to others so that they will appreciate it and thereby appreciate him. He is doing it only to find favor in the eyes of Hashem. This chokhmah is the light of the mind and the illumination of the character. When people gain an awareness of these great principles and think into them, it changes everything in their makeup. Something inside becomes illuminated, but without this knowledge, people walk in darkness. It seems to them that they are walking in sunlight and that they see everything, but inside it's totally dark because they haven't even looked for these great principles. These people are not bothered by their lack of actually understanding. They started with a limited knowledge when they have little children, and they've kept the same concept and the same level of understanding when they grow up. And you see that today all over the internet with people that basically man children. These are full-grown adults with a child's mind. And they haven't gone on to procreate, they haven't gone on to have children, and they get around in sort of t-shirt and jeans and wait for the next new thing to be the hype, whether it be movies or politics or whatever, and they just grab onto the next hype and hope that they continue to gain followers and subscribers and all that. There are people who walk in darkness. The people who walk in darkness from Yeshaya, Isaiah 9:1. Even good people walk in darkness. Do you hear that? Even good people walk in darkness. Even good people walk in darkness. Even good people walk in darkness. I can't say that enough. But for the people who think about Kavod HaLevavot, their mind is like a chamber which has become illuminated. It's like when the light goes on in a dark room and the whole room is filled with light. So it is that an individual's character becomes changed because of the great influence these thoughts have on him. That's why it's called the light of the mind. Or, I'm trying to read the Hebrew here, or HaLevavot, the light of the mind. It is the chokhmah of Kavod HaLevavot that the verse refers to. Behold, Hashem desire truth in the secrecy of a person's kidneys, meaning inside a person. Hashem desires emet, truth, which means we should have knowledge of emet, and that knowledge should be inside of us. The verse continues, in the secret places you let wisdom, in the secret places you let me know wisdom. In the secret places of the mind you have revealed wisdom to me. The mind without wisdom is like having a big apartment with many rooms, all dark. A man with a big torch comes in and casts light throughout the apartment. Now we begin to see the various rooms and doorways, and we become aware of what we possess. When we open our mind to the wisdom of Kavod HaLevavot, Hashem will favor us so that we will ultimately have the emet inside of us. And that's where we're going to conclude this particular topic, and that takes us to page 126. It's interesting because that analogy there of having a house with many rooms, and then all of a sudden the Kavod HaLevavot providing light to the rooms, is a nice way that sums up the title of my first book that I wrote in 2006 called All Lights On in the Master's House. And you can go on Amazon and you can see that book is still available. It got some really good reviews. In fact, I didn't really ever get a negative review. And it remains one of my most popular books that I've ever written. But that was really where I was coming from when I thought of the title All Lights On in the Master's House, because there are people that proclaim that they have right to the Master's house, to be a part of the Master's house and to be attached to his estate, but through their willful ignorance they refuse to be abreast of what's actually in the many rooms that are availed to them. They just go in one or two rooms and they just hang there, and they remain spiritually stunted in their growth. But this is not true. There's many rooms, in Hashem's house, and we pass from one room to the next as we learn. And so we want all lights on to be in the Master's house. Great plug for my book. Go and check it out. And bear in mind, if you do check it out, it's a book that I wrote very early on in my faith. And you can track an evolution of my walk by reading through all my books up to the latest book, The Messiah Didn't See. And why I'm saying this is because you can definitely see a growth occur there. But yeah, so that's taken us to part 17. Learning from wise men will be the next subject. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, Hashem willing, bye for now.